Score the movie out of 10.
7. You?
5. I didn't care about anything that was happening. There were just so many... The writing was awful. The acting was terrible. I see people saying the acting was good. The acting was really bad. I don't remember her name, but the actress who plays Superman's mom, she is, like, actually terrible in this movie. There were a lot of continuity errors in the editing and in the cinematography. It was extremely obvious which scenes were and were not directed by Zack Snyder. Barry Allen was extremely unlikable, to me at least. That just has nothing. It has nothing to do with my opinions on The Flash or anything. I just thought he was very poorly written and out of place for a movie like this. I just didn't care about anything that was happening.
To me, it felt kind of like a Justice League Unlimited movie with a live-action cast and a much bigger budget. Like, that's what it felt like to me. It felt very much like the animated shows. But the issue I had in terms of, like, in the agreement with you is the continuity, yes. And I didn't really care either. But I will say, like, the guy that spoke out, like, the most to me will definitely be Jason Momoa. From this movie, I'm really, really excited about Aquaman. Like, he was by far, like, the saving grace outside of Wonder Woman.
Jason Momoa was really good in this movie.
In terms of your, like, acting, like, for me in acting and saying, like, what acting was good, what acting was bad, I will say the core group of actors, they did decent. Like, Gal Gadot was as good as you were expecting because of Wonder Woman. Jason Momoa was a very, very unlikely surprise. Like, I was not expecting to like Aqua at all, and I can't get enough of him. In terms of Barry, I went in with a very, very, very much, like, big hatred of that character because of the CW show. But I will say at the same time, it's like, he kind of grew on me. You could definitely tell that it was Joss Whedon's child in terms of, like, the jokey side of Barry, as well as, like, his little bromance with Cyborg.
That was my biggest problem
like,
with it, though. The way that Barry Allen in this movie is written reminds me of the way Cade 6 is written in Destiny 2, and that's not a good thing.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Because it's...
But at the same time, I was like...
my problem with Barry Allen is the fact that I'm not exaggerating when I say that at least 50% of his lines are jokes. Like, it's almost non-stop jokes with Barry Allen, and I would say maybe 2 or 3 of them actually made me laugh. It's like he was spewing out jokes just for the sake of spewing out jokes. It was like, we need a comedic relief character. Shit. Make Barry Allen the comedic relief character. What makes a comedic relief character?
Cyborg.
A fuck ton of jokes. Give him jokes. All the jokes. Joke isn't funny, he doesn't matter. He's the comedic relief character. That's his thing. He tells jokes. It's like, holy shit.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
It's just my biggest problem with Barry Allen was just the fact that he was not a character. He was not a character. He was the comedic relief. The opening sequence of this movie sets the tone for how sloppy everything is going to be. But the opening sequence of the movie is Batman doing a Batman, stopping a robbery, and then running into a parademon. But the problem with that is, so he gets the robbery, he gets the robber, he catches the robber, detains him, and then goes after a parademon. But then after he catches the parademon, a dude shows up behind him and is like, what is that? What is that thing? You know they're coming because Superman is dead. But the guy talking to Batman behind him is intentionally blurred out and out of focus. You never see his face. You never know who the guy is.
Joe, it's the guy who it was the burglar the entire time. The moment he lands, you see him, like, land, roll, and tumble, and you see the feet, and then he's back on the same roof. That was the one thing I picked up immediately, which was the fact that he landed right back where he was. Why? I don't know.
Then why? Like,
That's
why?
the biggest
Then why
question
was
of the movie.
then why is the burglar with Batman? Because they were like. That's my biggest issue. Is like it's either not the burglar and it's an entirely different person who's never established, or like you said, it is the burglar and they were working together the whole time to get the person there. But even that doesn't make any sense because like the fight sequence that goes directly before that, the burglar was shooting at Batman, like shooting to kill him, and it's like, were they working together or were they not? He's intentionally made blurry in that shot, so it's like you never give a name to him. You never put a face on him. He is blurry.
If you look, you can tell that it's the same chest. It's the same little like set of what do you want to call it, armature. Like his torso is the exact same. And if you pay attention to the voice, It is the same exact voice. It's the
But that's
same
what I'm
guy.
talking about.
And
That's what I mean
but
when I say it sets the tone for how sloppy this movie is. We're
I-
having a
again,
debate, a conversation about whether or not someone in the first 3 minutes of the movie was who we think they are.
again,
That's
what I'm
my
gonna say,
point.
though, in this, again, I'm fully aware that this movie is not as good as we want, and it's not. It's not a good. It's not necessary. I wouldn't say it's not great, but it's not necessarily terrible either. There, like I
No,
said
it's not at all.
before the movie came out, there are little diamonds in the rough in this movie that make it good and make me want more. But the issue leading into this movie is the same thing that makes it the Achilles heel, which is definitely the continuity things, but not necessarily that continuity thing. It would be more along the lines of them trying to have this coherent story across all of these movies that isn't there. If I were to have been WB back when Man of Steel first came out, I would have had made this movie the sequel to Man of Steel. I wouldn't have tried to make Wonder Woman or BVS. My buddy was talking to me, and he's like, but Wonder Woman was needed. Wonder Woman was kind of needed. It wasn't a requirement, but because of how good that movie was, that's why everybody wants Wonder Woman to still be a thing. If they were to have been smart about it, they would have done Man of Steel, and then somehow had it be, at the end of Man of Steel, have, Superman have the situation that it was via whatever reason they could come up with, but then do Justice League and work backwards, because that would have separated them from Marvel in terms of all of this continuity error-esque stuff. It would have just been, boom, here's your team, here's our cast, see if you like them. If you like them, you go for it. You can be on their team, you don't have to, though. And from there, like I said, this movie got me hyped for Aquaman. I want an Aquaman movie so much, because they actually made him not, in terms of what he is in the comics. It's he is a very intimidating character in this movie. They finally made Aquaman into something outside of the joke of the group, which is always is in the comics. Oh, you talk to fish. Oh, you have telekinetic power. Oh, you can't do anything outside of the water. It's they establish he's a fighter, and that's exactly what we needed. It's I would have definitely been 100% on board with all of the DCEU if they would have done this, Man of Steel, Wonder Woman maybe, into Justice League, and then from there it's depending on how people react to this movie, it's without continuity, it's just straight up boom, here's a team up movie. It's and now stepping off of this team up movie, in the movie they even establish who's to come. There's a moment when the villain even says his name, and I was so it's established that the villain is coming. If they were to have done this at the very beginning and not had all of these issues of BVS and Wonder Woman leading into this movie would have easily been not such a disaster, because your biggest issues are continuity, correct?
It's not my biggest issue. It's one of my biggest issues.
I
had a lot of issues with this movie, but continuity and just general sloppiness was a big problem. Yes.
Yeah. But if you were to have now, if Batman vs Superman had never happened, would there have been some more continuity? Would continuity have been an issue?
Yes.
As much as
I'm not judging this movie compared to anything else. I'm judging Justice League as a movie.
Okay.
I'm not comparing it to anything else.
That's what I'm trying to do, because some people are actually dragging the fact that Batman vs Superman was such a disaster in the beginning, and people have issues with that.
No, I'm not comparing this movie to anything.
My thing in terms of cinematography is the fact that it's a very, very bland palette.
I actually disagree with that. I do think that it was a very bland palette, but I think it was less bland than other movies in the DCU.
Agreed. It was not as bland as others, but it's still very bland. It's still very much the dark grays, the over auburn reds.
Oh yeah.
And
absolutely.
the
No,
murky
this movie has
browns.
The DCU just in general has an awful color palette. And this movie still has a bad color palette, but it's not nearly as bad as before. One of the main things that actually stood out to me was Superman's suit is much more colorful in this movie. The blue and the red in Superman's suit really pop in this movie. And I was like, thank you. Because one of my biggest problems with Man of Steel and BVS was the fact that Superman's costume was, like, fucking gray. And I actually liked that they made Superman look like Superman in this movie. I have, like, 4 or 5 other continuity errors in my head. Just, like, errors in editing and just consistency.
And there are, and for sure. Yeah, trust me, there are.
And it's just the general feeling...
Say, like, there isn't.
The general feeling of sloppiness of this movie. There's the shot when Steppenwolf... It's the first time he appears... when he's at the Amazon, he's going to take the cube or the box from the Amazonians. In that scene, when he very first appears and he first brings in his army, because he drops down, they have the exchange, and then he brings in the army. There is a shot that was very clearly not supposed to be there. In the shot where the army first appears and all the Amazonians are like reacting to it. It then cuts to a shot of all the Amazonians standing still while the army is flying around, and they're just standing there. Like, they're not like, the shot that they used to put the army on top of was very clearly supposed to be a different shot. Another continuity error is when Bruce Wayne is first talking to Aquaman, and they first meet in the bar, and then they walk around outside the bar and have that exchange. And it goes like it's like a shot reverse shot conversation between Bruce and Aquaman. I don't remember exactly how many shots there are, but it goes Bruce, then Aquaman, Bruce, then Aquaman, Bruce, then Aquaman, and then when it cuts back to Bruce, he has 2 people behind him that weren't there before, and you're like, whoa, where'd they come from? Then it cuts back to Aquaman, then it cuts back to Bruce, and then it cuts to a wide shot. Gone. No, and then it cuts to a wide shot, and there's an entire group of 20 people behind him. And it was like, it was like, there was very clearly supposed to be a different shot there that they cut out. Another major issue I have with this movie, when they revive Superman and he goes all ballistic, the reason for him doing so is never explained.
Not entirely, but I remember there's a part with Momoa, and like, he does say, like, when you play with, like, Resurrection, you do, like, they will lose, like, people lose something.
Yeah, they
so
say, like, they were like, we don't know what, like, his whatever, his soul, his whatever. Like, I remember that. But it's never explained, it's never
outside of that
given any real detail or context as to why man is so violent to everyone when he first wakes up, and if Lois hadn't walked in, he would have killed Batman. And then the next time he sees him, everything is just all peachy. And it's like, that's never explained. Another continuity error is with Cyborg, actually in regards to that scene, when Cyborg fires at Superman.
His armor.
When he fires at Superman because of the defense mechanism, that's also never established before. Because that's not the first time in the movie that Cyborg has been under stress, and we haven't seen anything happen.
For sure.
And it's just one of those things, like, I sound like I'm just shitting on this movie, but it's just like, as someone, I didn't think this was a bad movie. I just thought it was so insanely sloppy. And the fact that I can just riff all of these mistakes off the top of my head is bothering me. And then it's not even just the mistakes that are getting to me, it's just the fact that, like I said before, I didn't care about anything that was happening. I didn't think any of the characters or any of the stakes were written well enough for me to care. And it was entertaining. It was a damn entertaining movie. I thought, although the fight cinematography was pretty bad, this movie has a bad case of the MCU shaky cam during the fight sequences. Some sequences are worse than others. I guess another thing that I'm tired of, just with the DCU in general, is I'm tired of the same plot all the time. I'm tired of world-threatening thing. We need to fight the world-threatening thing and find the artifact to help us defeat him. I'm really tired of that storyline. That's the same storyline of every DCU movie except Suicide Squad, and we don't talk about Suicide Squad because I don't even know if Suicide Squad counts as a movie at this point.
But like overall, like I do admit, like there's very, very blatant issues. But like you said, like it's not necessarily like terrible to the point where like it's unbearably like you want to leave the theater. But there's enough like goodness to it for sure. Like what makes you want to actually like root for them. Like, spoiler alert now because I'm talking later in the movie. That's kind of like it's a funny little moment that like I wasn't expecting, but I couldn't help but love, and it was when they're on the troop transport, and like Jason Momoa is like, it's like, you don't have superpowers, no offense. It's like, you don't know what you're doing, obviously. It's like, you could be a spy, and then he puts it Wonder Woman and goes, and you are just gorgeous. And like he instantly just starts like rambling on about how much he like and is infatuated with her, and you kind of look, and he pulls off the lasso later, and he's like super pissed, and I was like, that's funny. Like, the one thing this movie finally did well for out of all the other DC movies, though, outside of like, again, Wonder Woman, they took things out of Wonder Woman's book, and they actually made funny moments happen. Like, they weren't like, and like not in terms of like Barry Allen's blatant funny moments, but like funny moments that just were very organic. Like there's that one with Momoa, and then there's the one with Superman's tantrum, and how that one line that actually is the throwback to BVS in terms of like, do you bleed? And you see him on the ground, and he's like, something's definitely bleeding. Like they Joss Whedon had very, like, you could tell where Joss Whedon stepped in terms of like reshoots to put in some funny bits, and it was definitely good. Like, I want more of these characters after this. It's like, that's one thing that I will say they were able to fulfill at the end, which is wanting me to want Aquaman, wanting me to want Wonder Woman movie, to want like another outing of this group, but to finally fix all of these issues is like the next step. But it's like, this is definitely a step in the right direction, but it shouldn't have. It's still like 3 steps back compared to like Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
But it, like, compared to, I would say, what, Justice League 1 or .05 being Batman vs Superman, it's definitely better.
Yeah. I think just my biggest issue with this movie is, one of my biggest issues with this movie is it feels like an overcorrection of the DCU.
For sure.
It feels like the DCU people got in a room and they were like, okay, what do people not like about our movies, and let's change it. But in doing so, they changed it too much to the point that they missed the point entirely.
For sure. For sure.
I think I think people were like, people don't like how overly complicated our plots are, so let's have an oversimplified plot that is extremely generic. People don't like the lack of humor in our movies, so let's have a character who speaks in about 60% jokes. I don't care if they're not funny, but people won't be able to say we don't have jokes in this movie. People don't like that Batman was a killer in the last movie. Let's make him traditional Batman and completely change his character without warning. Like, it's just like this movie, it feels like an overcorrection of the DCU. And it's not I don't...
All right, pause it real fast.
You can decide whether or not that's a bad thing.
I take a phone call. Give me a second. Keep talking.
Sure. You can decide whether or not that's a bad thing. It definitely... It hurts the movie that it's an overcorrection, but it still helps the DCU in general because they realize and are attempting to fix their mistakes. What would you rather have another dull, overly complicated, bloated mess like BVS, or would you rather have a shorter, simpler, unfunny but still entertaining action movie, which is what we got from Justice League? It's like it's a step in the right direction. It's still not good. It's still not where it needs to be in order to be successful or really successful. It's a step in the right direction. I still think the DCU needs to get rid of Zack Snyder immediately.
Oh, for sure.
Because
Snyder needs to go.
The worst... Like I said earlier, you can totally tell which parts of this movie are directed by Snyder and which parts were Joss Whedon.
For sure.
It's really obvious, and it's no surprise that the Zack Snyder bits are some of the worst bits in the entire movie. The opening credits of this movie are so fucking dumb. The opening credits with the song, it's so fucking dumb. Bad. It's like it's the Watchmen opening credits except minus all of the emotional weight and interesting story beats of Watchmen. It's like
I agree.
let's remake the Watchmen opening credits, but with a bad song and no interesting story beats to play off of, and no interesting visual style, because this movie has to be family friendly. This movie is an overcorrection. It tries to correct the mistakes of the DCU, and in doing so, it makes more mistakes. But I don't see it as a bad thing for the long run, because they are trying to fix the mistakes.
And
now it's a matter of fine-tuning the things that they have started to fix.
And I will also say, there's a part where, like, me and my friends have discussed, like, there was obviously in the writer's room, there is a guy, because, like, the moment with, at the very end, like, when they save the day and it cuts to Cyborg, and he just goes, and he finally says, like, his catchphrase. Like, there was, like, that one random guy, obviously, in this writer's room, who was very much, like, fighting to, like, get in these, like, little nods to, like, comic book fans where you can watch it and be like, oh my gosh, yes, I got that. Like, there's very much moments in terms of it where it's, like, the Captain America and Avengers where it's like, I understood that reference. Like, there are a lot of those. But we're like, it's obviously, like, one guy who's barely able to, like, get his foot in the door, but he's there. So, like, props off to you.
That's a really good way of putting it, yeah. One of my biggest problems with the DCU up until this point is because it seems like the movies have all been made by people who don't understand the characters. This movie still feels like that. It still feels like it still feels like the people in charge don't understand the characters, but it also at the same time feels like the people in charge who don't know the characters have some people whispering in their ear, hey, this is what that's supposed to be like. Because
so, like, hats off to those guys.
It's a step in the right direction. Yes, hats off to whoever the people whispering in the ears are over at WB. Coming out of the movie, I tweeted about how I thought this movie was a 6. And in this video I said 5, because not to keep just being the Debbie Downer, but this is a movie that you dislike the more that you think about it. The more that you think about the story and the things that happen and the characterization of certain things in this movie, the more problems you find with it. This is a very face value movie. This is a movie that's like, look at all these cool things, listen to this simple story and enjoy it. And in the moment, you're like, okay, I'm enjoying it. There's problems, there's problem, but I'm enjoying it. But then once you walk out of the movie, that's when the problems start to compute in your head, and you're like, wait, that decision that person made was fucking dumb. This person makes no sense. That character has no motivation. It's one of those kinds of movies where it's like, the movie expects you to take everything at face value, and that only really works until you walk out of the theater and you start to put the pieces together in your head of what went wrong here.
Did you stay till the end of the credits?
Yeah.
Can we talk about that? Because I fangirled
first
so hard.
Let's talk about the mid credit.
That was funny. That was good.
The race with Superman and Flash.
Yeah, that
was
good.
Awesome.
Also,
that was awesome.
Okay. Not hats off to that scene too, when like Barry is going and they're dealing with Superman, and you're like, oh my gosh, he's gonna go help, and then you just see his eyes follow him, and you're just like, oh. And like the face Ezra Miller was like so perfection in that moment of just like the oh crapness of that moment, because like up until that point he is led to believe he's the fastest guy. So seeing a guy that can keep up with him ever so slightly, because the punch that he throws, like obviously Barry is still faster than him ever so slightly, but like that moment, that's probably one of the other diamonds in the rough in that movie for sure. Like I was so happy in that moment. I was laughing my face off in terms of that moment, not because of like anything that he said, but just the way that moment was handled. It was super, super good. Can you agree with that or no?
Absolutely, yeah.
Because I want to make sure that like if you do have like disagreement, please, this is what it's for. We're here to talk. So it's like I just want to make sure, like, are we on the same page on that? Because it was a really, really awesome moment, I feel. And that race was just perfect. Like, that's such a good way of, like again, hats off to the random guy in the writer's room who got that through to them. Like, whoever did that, you, sir, are the real MVP that DC deserves. Like, whoever you are, step into the director's like seat because we want you all the time. Kick Snyder to the curb. He might be a comic book fan, but he's not a good director of comic book movies. But now, the final end credit scene. I called that guy as soon as they showed this, like, the little clip of him with his like sword. I literally yelled at the top of my lungs in the theater that it was Deathstroke, and my friend was like, "Shh," and I'm like, "You think I'm wrong?" And the moment you actually saw him in all of his glory, the entire theater like lost their mind. Because he looks awesome for every reason.
Yeah.
Me coming from a guy who watches Arrow, like, I love Arrow's Deathstroke, but this one had that perfect amount of, like, I feel cosmetic Deathstroke, and obviously there's some bits of, like, CGI in his armor, which worked beautifully. Are you excited for what is to come with, like, what Luthor is planning? If they're able to correct their course. So think of it as like just like
I'm gonna quote I Hate Everything in his Destiny 2 review. He in that review and his quote from that review just keeps popping in my head. That I'm sick of games and movies constantly telling me that there is more as opposed to me actually wanting more. I feel like the DCU hasn't earned my hype at this point. And as much as, and you know, obviously yes, the answer is yes, I'm excited to see what comes next, but I'm really tired of just DC and Warner Bros. Just shoving all this shit at us and telling us to be excited as opposed to actually fleshing out their fucking stories.
Oh, for sure. Because it's still they're still definitely
because the whole reason the MCU gets away with that. And even then, the MCU it gets annoying at times when the MCU is like, here, look, Easter egg, shit that's coming in the future, and it's like, all right, you know, fucking pump the brakes for a second, guys.
Let me take a breather.
But the reason the MCU gets away with that is just because, and this isn't a Marvel versus DC fanboy thing, it's just objectively look at the quality of MCU and the reception of MCU movies compared to DCU movies. They get away with telling you there's more. DCU doesn't really get. I don't give them that pass yet.
For sure.
You know, I want to want more, not to be told that there is more. I don't feel like the DCU has earned that right yet to tell me that there's more and expect me to be excited for it.
For sure.
So as excited as I am to see Deathstroke and as excited as I am to see future DCU things, I still don't feel like DCU has earned the right to shove it in our face and tell us to be excited.
I can agree with that. It's like one thing I was talking to my brother about, who's also like a nerd, like he's definitely a comic junkie like myself, and he was like, the thing about Marvel is the fact that he said Marvel.
Get ready. We have nothing.
I know. He's like, Marvel is good, but it's like, but Marvel is definitely catered towards those like select few. He feels. Because he's like, in reality, it's very much kiddie, but that's because like the characters in Marvel are very much kiddie, not because of like, some people would argue it's because Disney now like helps run it, but it's like in general like Marvel has always had that more child-centric thing, and it's paid off for them and it's worked, and they've been able to put some gravitas to their characters that make you want to like them even as an adult. But my brother was like, the thing about DC characters though is DC definitely has the stronger written characters.
Yes.
And he's definitely right in that regard. And I'm like, there's no arguing in that. It's like, and that's why that's why I feel all the DC fanboys are so set in their ways that like, you know, it's better. It's like, the characters are, but the people running it aren't. It's like, if we were to be able to get Kevin Feige as president of Warner Bros., I'm almost positive that our like entire perspective of DC up until this point would just be tarnished, because he would just be like, nope, we're starting everything over. The end. No like reason behind it. Because Kevin Feige knows how to hire the people who can do it right, but at the same time who want to do it right. And it says, I'm going to give you the time, the money, the like crew that can make this as good of a movie as we want it to be. Not just me and like the uppity ups, but it's like you as an individual. It's like when they hired James Gunn, it's like he was an out of the nowhere director, but they were like, "Can you do it?" And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "I want to do it." So they're like, "Okay, take the time, take the cash, take the cast, take the crew, make what you can, and you go at your own pace. And when you're ready, let's do it." And that's exactly why I feel Guardians is like such a big, crucial thing. But why DC is so afraid. It's like they were to have just released, what do you want to call it? Like BVS without the directors, like Ultimate Directors Edition cut, like, and just let Zack Snyder do his thing. It's like Ultimate Edition is such a stronger film with the extra story content. It's not perfect, but it makes it far more bearable as a Batman versus Superman story. And it's like, but the Warner Brothers, and it's the same thing like I heard with Suicide Squad. Everyone said Suicide Squad was going to be the but like before like the re-edits and stuff, like when they were doing the very first like preview screenings of it, like people were saying like Suicide Squad is going to be the thing that competes with Guardians of the Galaxy. Like this is their answer, and I was hyped as heck because of that. But then when the reshoots happened, they didn't. That was when Suicide Squad had that identity crisis of, do you want to be the dark, gritty, like villain show, or do you want to have that, like, you know,
Scott
comedic?
Pilgrim?
Exactly, and it's like, and if you would have Scott Pilgrimed it with just a dash of adult themes, it would have been perfect beyond words. But because they're so scared to let somebody actually at the helm and have absolute and utter freedom in that regard, that's where it starts to get kerfuffled.
Yeah, I think that's the best way I can put it. What you just said is the fact that Marvel is not scared to let fans run the movies. DC is. You know, with
Because
Marvel, all the people involved with the MCU are very clearly fans of the source material. And they're giving fans what they want to see while still making coherent stories. DCU and WB, they don't seem to have the confidence to let fans take the reins of the production, which is why pretty much every DCU movie up until this point has had some kind of identity crisis.
And it's like, and it's not to say that there aren't fans amidst that group.
Not at all. No.
Jeff Johns is like he's a G in terms of like what he stands for. It's like Jeff Johns and Kevin Feige have gone on stage and like completely put aside the whole Marvel DC grudge for the sake of comic books. And it's like Jeff Johns is a comic book fan, but it's like at the same time he also looks at himself and is like, I can't direct these kinds of things. I have no talent for it. But at the same time, the uppity ups that are like all focused on the cash are still too afraid to go and say, but we want to hire somebody with that same passion of Jeff Johns who can write these movies. It's like them getting Joss Whedon was a work of art. Like that was the most amazing, perfect thing you could have done. But at the same time, it's like the fact that he had to kind of pick up the pieces that Zack Snyder had already kind of pissed all over. That was where this movie got its identity crisis. And even then, it's like Joss Whedon did help direct this movie, but it's the director, like, regards still went to Snyder because they technically put Whedon on as a screenplay writer, even though he ordered a boatload of reshoots because he realized that this movie needed help. But it's like hiring him now, it's like he already, like, Joss Whedon is already in talks for a Batgirl solo film, and you know what? I'm hyped. I want that more than anything, because I know he can make a movie that both he wants to make but that we want to be made, and he will fight for it. It's like the huge thing with Marvel and Ultron with him. It's like he fought to make Ultron the way he wanted, and even then Ultron was still like, you know, that was when Ultron got kind of iffy because Disney had issues, or Marvel had issues with him at some point, and he had to kind of like fight back, which worked to some extent. And he had to, but it was because he felt his time had finally run up there. So the fact that he was willing to jump ship and go to DC, by all means, jump ship and go fix that, because I do want better Batman. I do want better, like, bits and pieces of it. Like, there's another fan favorite moment in that movie of Justice League is when they're doing story time with, like, Diana, and she's like, yeah, it's like we fought him like back in the day, and like we had the Atlanteans, and we had the Amazonians and the tribes of men. It's like, oh, and warriors from other worlds. I about lost my mind when you saw that lantern. Like,
Yeah, that was cool.
I freaked out. I was like, oh, like he's like they're there. It's like, and even the villain himself even name dropped like the lanterns when he's like, yeah, it's like there's no Kryptonian to protect the world, there's no lantern to protect the world. It's like, so the lanterns are there and they showed one. So it's like they set the building blocks in place. They really did, and they need to just go with it. And they need to let Whedon step up to the plate and bat, because he will do it far better than most.
Is the Affleck Batman movie still happening?
Ben
I feel
Affleck
like every
has been
other
on the-
month they decide whether or not they're gonna do it, and it always changes.
But it makes, like, honestly, I feel bad for Batfleck because, like, so many people have issues with him, but it's like, in reality, it's like, with the
not his
Batman they
fault.
were aiming for, no, it's not, but like, at the same time, it's like, me coming from a place of a comic book fan and knowing where they kind of took inspiration from for Batman vs. Superman, being, you know, the Frank Miller Dark Knight Returns arc, it's like, we do have a very old, like, war grizzled Batman in that arc, and that's exactly what they aim for. So casting Ben Affleck in that role was flawless. It's like, and he plays both the dark, brooding Frank Miller Batman with like that charming side of Bruce Wayne that we haven't had since like George Clooney days. So like he does it well, but it just sucks that the fans are so quick to be like, no, you're terrible because, you know, you're Ben Affleck. But I'm like, no, dude, it's like, let him see. It's like, and there's that gem of a moment with the crime, like the thugs and BVS. It's like, by no means, you know, that's him, but it's like, seeing him do that as the character of Batman was what made me love it. And I hate the fact that so many people have to give him a like bad rap for it solely for the fact that he is who he is, and that's where all of this like moments of like, oh, is it happening, is it not happening? It's like, he doesn't want it to happen because he doesn't like all the fans like who were just on him all the time. Like, the fans did not welcome Ben Affleck with open arms at all. They went in and just saying he's gonna suck, it's gonna be trash, we hate him, we hate him, we hate him, rather than saying let's give him some, like, let's use our knowledge of the comics and see where he goes with it. Because Ben Affleck, there's a part he said he's a fan of the Batman and he wants to make the best one he can, but it's very difficult when everybody is saying, no, you suck at this.
My whole thing with
And,
Batfleck is like, let's like, before you judge Ben Affleck as Batman, let him
Get a
be in
sentry
a
turret.
good movie first.
Yeah, stop giving him like very poorly written moments. And like there are good moments there. There are some good moments with him. Like, I thought for sure him and Diana were gonna get it on after one of those fights, and like his shoulders dislocated. I was like, no, but I was like, at the same time, I'm like, I kind of want that to work, because like they have some of the best on-screen chemistry outside of her and Jason Momoa. Anybody who's a DC fan who like rips into Affleck, it's like, let him have a little bit of more time with this. It's like, don't push him away too much. It's like, he is one of the best we got.
Yeah, it's just before we judge Affleck as Batman, you have to acknowledge the fact that he's only been in 3 movies. 2 of them were pieces of shit, and one of them was okay-ish. It's kind of unfair to judge his performance when he's given shit to work with.
It's like,
Even the best actor can't make that shit look okay.
No,
It's the whole thing with the Star Wars prequels. Why the Star Wars prequels had such all-star casts, but the acting was still fucking awful. It's like, you can only do so much with the script like that. And that's really what Batfleck is suffering from right now, is the fact that you can only do... It doesn't matter how well you can play Batman, and I really do think Affleck could do a fantastic Batman if he was given control of things, or if he was given better writers. But it's just, that's the problem, is that he has shitty directors and shitty writers to work with. So it doesn't matter what he does. It's just no one's going to like it, and it's not his fault.
Exactly, and it's like, and even then, it's like you said, the two, and in terms of some people who don't realize this, because if you avoided it, the 3 movies he had been in, being Justice League, Batman vs. Superman, and he also made a mini appearance in Suicide Squad. Fun fact for those who haven't watched it yet. Like,
Yeah.
it's not his fault. It's like some people will go and say, no, he had 2. No, he's had 3, because they've already established that Suicide Squad is a part of the DCEU by having this background, the backstory of the Joker being they get hunted down by Ben Affleck, which was brilliant, by the way. It's like that was probably one of my favorite scenes of Suicide Squad, was him talking, like him meeting with Amanda Waller and Amanda Waller knowing who he was. Overall, though, it's like I will still say, like, this movie was definitely a needed step. And it's like, and like I said at the very beginning, I'm hyped for more. I want more Aqua. The Aqua Momoa needs to stay forever. And by all means, if you're a DC fan and you know some of the arcs that can come from this, it's like, go see Justice League. It's like, it's a good little romp. It's not by any means the groundbreaking movie of the DC universe, but it's a fun little time. I had a good time watching it. And it's like, and me coming from the guy who watches the CW Flash TV show, it's like I actually enjoyed this version of Barry far more than I have seen Barry in all of like the 4 seasons of the Flash on CW. It's like I like this Barry more than him, because the Barry on CW is mopey Barry. I want the CW to now look at the Justice League, and that's saying something, because I love CW shows, and I'm not a huge fan of this, but I want that kind of Barry now to now get transferred into the shows. The bar I had for that movie was absolutely terrible in terms of placement. I thought it was going to be just the most terrible thing ever, and it genuinely surprised me.